Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to our random review. Today we go back to 1981 for The Salamander, directed by Peter Zinner. This is one of those Sunday afternoon films, these Euro thriller films. This is based on a novel. This has a ridiculous cast. Franco Nero, Anthony Quinn, Claudia Cardinale, Christopher Lee, Sybil Danning, Martin Balsam, Eli Wallach, Cleven Little, Paul Smith, John Steiner. So one of these just ridiculous casts that you used to get in the 70s and 80s. It's almost got a cast like a Richard Lester film. Music by Jerry Goldsmith. It was directed by Peter Zinner. This was the only film that he directed. I wasn't aware of who he was until I actually looked him up. So he was an editor who co-edited the first two Godfather films. He did The Deer Hunter, or Michael Cimino of course, Officer and a Gentleman, The Professionals, In Cold Blood, Kalatazov's The Red Tent, the version of A Star Is Born with Barbra Streisand and Chris Christopherson. So edited a lot of Hollywood films, a lot of famous Hollywood films, but this was his only shot at directing a film, and you can perhaps see why he didn't get another shot. You know, I'm not going to pretend this is a great film, but it's an interesting little film, and as I say, it's one of those Sunday afternoon films that you can kind of watch. This is a Region A Blu-ray from Scorpion releasing, even though it's also got ITV Studios attached to it as well. It's a 2017 HD scan in widescreen, so it does look very good. There's some audio thoughts from producer Paul Maslansky, memories from John Steiner, who does come across as being somewhat of a character, shall we say, and the original trailer. So the film itself, with this ridiculous cast, is about a security officer played by Franco Nero. His first two names are Dante Alighieri, you know, like the famous poet, and one of the leading generals in the country, set in Italy, has been murdered, and the card of the Salamander has been left on his desk. Now, the kind of state line is that he died in his sleep. Don't want people to know that he was actually murdered. So Franco Nero investigates. So there's a wonderful scene at his funeral, and the camera's panning along all the characters, and you automatically know which ones are famous actors and which ones aren't. And Franco Nero, in the voiceover, which is one of the problems of the film, it does have a voiceover pretty much explaining what's going on. It's a very Blade Runner voiceover, unfortunately. But he basically tells you who everybody is. So the first one of the characters we meet is Sybil Danning, who was the general's mistress. Turns out she's not necessarily just an ordinary mistress. She's part of a group, and she was pretty much infiltrating the general, in a different way than he was probably infiltrating her. And Franco Nero finds out that there's a fascist plot to have a coup and become back to the good old days of Italy with fascism. And obviously as he gets more and more involved, it goes down typical Euro thriller avenues. But there's some interesting little touches, and obviously this wonderful cast. Christopher Lee plays his boss. Eli Wallach is perhaps a general who might be in line to take over. His wife is Claudia Cardinale, who's having an affair with John Steiner, and more of their secrets get released. Martin Balsam is Franco Nero's advisor. He does call Franco Nero little brother all the time. I'm not sure he is actually his brother, but that's just a turn of phrase. There's a wonderful performance by a ginger cat as Martin Balsam's cat, strangely enough. Paul Smith, who, again, you might not recognise the name, but he's the heavy set man from Crime Wave, who plays fairly manic characters. He plays a state torturer, basically called the Surgeon, and it's not that far away from Laurence Olivier's dentist in Marathon Man, but obviously a slightly more rambunctious and manic character than Olivier's performance. And Franco Nero has a nice line about, he's known as the Surgeon, but he never went to medical school. And we do see examples of his work. And if you've ever wanted a film where you see Franco Nero in a jockstrap fighting Paul Smith, then The Salamander might be the film for you. Martin Balsam, who in 1981 is obviously getting on a bit, but he has a quite beautiful and moving monologue about when the Nazis came to Rome and started rounding people up. It's actually quite a moving and poignant monologue, and Franco Nero's reaction to that is quite beautifully done. So in between all these kind of bonkers events and this crazy cast, I mean, Clavon Little, who's obviously famous from Blazing Saddles and Vanishing Point, he turns up with a Polish name as a US soldier stationed in part of NATO who helps Franco Nero out in a tight spot. There's just little bizarre appearances by people. Just gives it that odd end of the 70s, early 80s. If this was made in the 70s and the Years of Lead by an Italian, it might have a different feel and a different ending to it. But Sybil Danning is quite interesting in the film, because obviously she's more famous for exploitation films and B films, which this is a kind of a B Euro thriller. But at no point does she take her clothes off or anything like that. It's a very straight performance, if you like. And it did kind of get me thinking, at what point did Sybil Danning become, the kind of exploitation queen to some extent? Maybe it was a Christopher Lee Nowling too. I'm not quite sure. So it's a wonderful little odd, strange film. Again, worth seeing for a couple of just excellent scenes. It is paced pretty well. I mean, once it gets started, it doesn't really drag. at 102 minutes. But obviously it wasn't very successful, and Peter Zinner never got to direct another film. But as I said, he has edited a fairly impressive list of films. I mean, some of the cast, like Claudia Cardinale, only gets a couple of scenes. Clavon Little, as I said, only turns up for like 10 minutes. Anthony Quinn as this super powerful businessman, who kind of teams up with Franco Nero, is always fun, and he actually is a little bit underplaying it, whereas sometimes he's guilty of doing a little bit too much. But there's another wonderful Franco Nero performance. And again, as I say, if you ever wanted to see Franco Nero fighting somebody with only wearing a jockstrap, it's right up there with Viggo Mortensen's naked bathhouse fight in Eastern Promises. It's well worth checking out. So thanks very much for watching. This is random reviews after all, and the Salamander is fairly random. Please let me know if you've seen the Salamander, if you're one of the few people who've seen it, and what you think of it. And hopefully you'll join me again for more random reviews. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, saying farewell.